$3 million. That is the exact figure my father just scrawled on a tear-soaked napkin while my mother clutches her last fake designer bag. 6 months ago, they laughed at my art and called me a joke compared to my sister. Today, that joke just sold a digital collection for $3.2 million while they face bankruptcy. Watch closely as I buy my freedom. My name is Alessandra Vale. If you live in New York and read the financial columns, you already know the last name. The Vales are not just rich, they are historic. My family deals in the kind of money that smells like old leather, mahogany, and dusty deeds to buildings that have stood in Manhattan since the turn of the 20th century. We are real estate and classic investments. We are stone and mortar. We are serious. I, however, was the glitch in their perfectly curated lineage. At 24 years old, I stood in the grand foyer of our Hamptons estate, clutching a portfolio case that felt heavier than a slab of concrete. It was the peak of summer, and the air smelled of salt water and expensive perfume. This was the Summer Palace, a sprawling 10-bedroom monstrosity that sat so close to the ocean it felt like the Atlantic was trying to reclaim it. Tonight was the main event of the season. It was my sister Isabella's 21st birthday. Isabella was everything I was not. She was the golden child, the prodigy, the fragile genius. Since she could hold a bow, my parents had strapped a violin to her chin and declared her a virtuoso, while I spent my childhood covered in graphite and digital stylus calluses. Isabella was being paraded in front of private tutors and European maestros. I took a deep breath, smoothing the fabric of my dress. I had bought it off the rack at a vintage store in Brooklyn, and I knew exactly what my mother would say about it. But tonight was not supposed to be about me. It was about Isabella, and for the first time in years, I had allowed a tiny, dangerous spark of hope to ignite in my chest. I had made something for her. The double doors swung open, and the noise hit me like a physical wave. The main ballroom was packed with the elite of the East Coast. I saw senators clinking glasses with hedge fund managers. I saw women whose faces I recognized from society pages, their necks draped in diamonds that could feed a small country for a decade. The room was a sea of black tuxedos and shimmering gowns, all swirling under the light of 3 massive crystal chandeliers. I navigated the crowd, trying to make myself as small as possible. I was a ghost in my own house. A few guests glanced at me, their eyes sliding over my face with zero recognition, before returning to their conversations about interest rates and merger acquisitions. To them, I was nobody. It was just background noise. "Alessandra? You actually came." The voice was sharp, cutting through the ambient chatter. I turned to see my mother, Elena Vale. She was wearing a silver gown that clung to her surgically maintained figure, her fingers wrapped tightly around a glass of champagne. She looked me up and down, her lip curling slightly as she assessed my appearance. "Hello, Mother," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Happy birthday to Isabella. She is over by the piano," my mother said, dismissing my greeting. "Try not to make a scene. Alessandra, the chairman of Chase Bank is here, and your father is in the middle of closing a very delicate deal. Do not embarrass us." "I brought a gift," I said, lifting the portfolio slightly. "I spent 2 months on it." My mother sighed, a long, weary sound that implied my very existence was exhausting to her. "Oh, Alessandra, another one of your cartoons? Why can you not just buy her a nice scarf like a normal sister?" I swallowed the lump in my throat. "It is not a cartoon, Mother, it is art." She waved her hand, already looking past me. "Just give it to her later. Do not bother your father with it." But I could not just give it to her later. I wanted them to see. I wanted, with a pathetic desperation that makes me cringe now, for them to look at what I could do and finally understand. I was a concept artist. I built worlds. I designed the impossible. And this piece, this portrait of Isabella, was my peace offering. I found my father, Julian Vale, holding court near the center of the room. He was a large man, broad-shouldered and imposing, with silver hair that was always perfectly coiffed. He was laughing at something a congressman had said, his face flushed with expensive scotch and the high of being the most powerful man in the room. Isabella stood next to him, looking like a porcelain doll in a pale pink dress, clutching her violin case as if it were a shield. "Father," I said, stepping into the circle. The conversation died down. My father turned, his eyes narrowing as they landed on me. For a second, just a second, I saw the annoyance flash across his face before he masked it with a tight, fake smile. "Ah, Alessandra," he boomed, his voice projecting to the back of the room. "The prodigal daughter returns from where are you living now? That basement in Queens?" "Brooklyn," I corrected quietly. "Happy birthday, Isabella." Isabella smiled, but it was thin and nervous. She looked at father before she looked at me. "Thank you, Ali." "I have something for you," I said. I felt the eyes of the crowd on me, the bankers, the politicians, the socialites. They were all watching the little family drama unfold. My hands shook as I unzipped the portfolio. I pulled out the large, framed print. It was magnificent. I say that without arrogance because I know my craft. It was a digital painting of Isabella, but not as she was in this stifling room. I had reimagined her in a futuristic setting, standing on the edge of a neon-lit precipice, her violin transformed into a weapon of light. The strings glowing with energy, I had painted her as a warrior, strong and fierce, breaking free from the constraints of gravity. The colors were vibrant, electric blues, deep violets, and blinding whites. It was dynamic. It was alive. I held it up, turning it so both my family and the guests could see. "I made this for you," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "It is titled The Virtuoso Unleashed." There was a silence, a long, stretching silence that felt like it lasted for hours. I waited for a gasp of awe. I waited for Isabella to say she loved the way I saw her strength. I waited for my father to nod. Just once, in approval. Instead, my father started to chuckle. It began as a low rumble in his chest and then erupted into a bark of laughter. He reached out and took the frame from my hands, not gently, but with a grip that threatened to crack the glass. He held it up high, like he was inspecting a piece of rotten fruit. "What on earth is this?" he asked, looking around at his guests. "Is she a robot? Is she fighting aliens?" The crowd tittered. A few people covered their mouths to hide their smiles. "It is concept art," I explained, my face burning. "It represents her music, the power of it. It is metaphoric." "Metaphoric?" My father sneered. He lowered the painting and looked at me with pure disdain. "It looks like a video game. It looks like something a 12-year-old boy would tape to his bedroom wall." "Julian, be nice," my mother said, appearing at his elbow, though her voice dripped with amusement. Alessandra tried. She has always had such a vivid imagination. "Imagination is one thing. Elena," my father said, his voice rising. He wanted an audience. He wanted to perform. "Delusion is another. Look at this. We have a daughter who plays Mozart and Bach, music that has survived centuries, and her sister draws comic books." He thrust the painting back at me. I fumbled to catch it, the corner of the frame digging into my ribs. "It is digital art," I whispered, fighting the tears that were stinging my eyes. "It is a respected industry, Father." "Respected by who?" he countered, stepping closer. "By children? By people who live in basements and do not have real jobs? This is trash, Alessandra. It is childish trash. You wasted electricity creating this." "Why can you not be realistic like Isabella?" my mother chimed in, smoothing Isabella's hair. "Your sister is preparing for her debut at Carnegie Hall. She is disciplined. She contributes to the legacy of this family. And you? You are still sitting in a dark room drawing cartoons." I looked at Isabella. I begged her with my eyes to say something. She knew how hard I worked. She knew that I had stayed up for 3 nights straight to finish the rendering on her dress in the painting. We used to be close. before the weight of our parents' ambition crushed the air out of the house. Isabella looked at the painting. She looked at the glowing violin I had created for her. Then she looked at our father, the man who held the purse strings, the man who controlled her entire world. She looked down at her shoes. She said nothing. The betrayal hit me harder than the insults. My father was not done. He was enjoying the spotlight. He had had too much scotch, and his cruelty was flowing freely now. He placed a heavy hand on my shoulder. It felt like a clamp. "Look at me, Alessandra," he commanded. I forced myself to look up into his cold, gray eyes. "You need to wake up," he said, his voice booming so that every person in the room could hear. "We have indulged this little hobby of yours long enough, but let us be honest." He gestured to Isabella, who was shrinking into herself on the small stage. "Your sister is a star," he declared. Then he pointed a finger directly at my face. "You are a joke." The words hung in the air, vibrating against the crystal chandeliers. "You are a joke." "Wake up, daughter," he continued, sneering. "Your art will not feed you. It will not pay the rent. It is scribbles, meaningless scribbles." For a second, the room was silent, and then someone laughed. It was a short, sharp sound from the back, then another, and suddenly, the whole room was laughing. The men in their $5,000 suits, the women in their couture gowns, they were all laughing. They were laughing at me. They were laughing at my gift. I looked at Isabella again. My heart shattered when I saw her shoulders shaking. She was not crying. She was giggling. She had her hand over her mouth, and she was giggling along with them. She was relieved. I realized. She was relieved that, for once, the pressure was off her. She was happy to let me be the sacrifice if it meant she could breathe for a moment. I felt something inside me snap. It was a quiet snap, like a dry twig breaking in a winter forest. It was the sound of the last tether connecting me to this family severing completely. I did not scream. I did not throw the painting. I did not cause the scene my mother was so afraid of. I calmly zipped the portfolio case back up. I moved with a mechanical precision. The laughter was still ringing in my ears, a cacophony of wealth and cruelty, but it sounded distant now, like it was coming from underwater. "Thank you," I said. My father blinked, confused. "Thank you?" "Yes," I said, my voice devoid of any emotion. "Thank you for making this very clear." I turned my back on them. I walked through the parting crowd. I could feel their eyes on my back, their whispers like little needles. The failure, the black sheep, the joke. "Alessandra," my mother called out, her voice taking on that fake, concerned tone she used for the public. "Where are you going? We have not cut the cake." I did not stop. I walked out of the ballroom, down the grand marble staircase, and out the front door. The valet looked at me with surprise as I stormed past the line of Bentleys and Rolls-Royces to my beat-up sedan parked on the grass. I threw the painting into the passenger seat. I got in and slammed the door, sealing myself in the silence. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely put the key in the ignition. I looked back at the house one last time. It glowed in the night, a beacon of golden light and hollow promises. I made a vow then, sitting in the dark, with the smell of the ocean filling the car. I would never ask them for anything again. I would never show them my work again. I would never seek their validation again. They thought I was a joke. Fine. I would be the best joke they had ever heard. I started the engine and drove away, leaving the veils and their laughter behind me. I drove back to the city, back to my studio, back to the only world that made sense. I did not know then that the painting sitting on the seat next to me, the trash, the waste of electricity, was the seed that would grow into an empire. I did not know that in 6 months, I would be the one holding the checkbook. All I knew was that Alessandra Vale, the daughter, had died in that ballroom, and in the darkness of the Long Island Expressway, Ether was born. My studio apartment in Brooklyn was not a home, it was a cockpit. While the rest of the city slept under a blanket of humidity and street lamp haze, My room was bathed in the cool, clinical glow of three 32-inch 4K monitors. The air conditioner rattled in the window, fighting a losing battle against the heat generated by my rig. This machine was a beast of my own creation, a tower of tempered glass and liquid cooling tubes that pulsed with a rhythmic, ultraviolet heartbeat. To my parents, this equipment was a toy. To me, it was the engine of a Ferrari. I sat in my ergonomic chair, the kind that cost more than my first car, and adjusted the haptic feedback glove on my left hand. My right hand hovered over the tablet, the stylus an extension of my index finger. The world outside did not exist. There was no Hamptons. There was no father laughing at my work. There was only the grid, in this digital ether. I was not Alessandra Vale, the disappointing daughter. I was Ether. The name commanded respect in channels where my father's last name meant absolutely nothing. In the encrypted chat rooms of Silicon Valley game developers and the private servers of Hollywood production designers, Ether was a myth. I was the concept artist you called when you needed to visualize the impossible. I did not just draw characters. I built biomes. I engineered physics, defying architecture. I wove narratives into the texture of a digital coat. My anonymity was my armor. No one knew I was a 24-year-old woman eating instant ramen in Brooklyn. They thought I was a collective of artists in Tokyo, or perhaps a recluse living in a bunker in Iceland. I let them believe whatever they wanted. The mystery drove the price up. A notification pinged on my center screen. It was a secure line request from Gideon Cross. I tapped a key to accept. Gideon's face appeared. He looked like a chaos magician who had accidentally wandered into a hedge fund meeting. He wore a velvet blazer over a band t-shirt, and his round glasses reflected the light of his own multiple screens. Gideon was the only person in the physical world who knew the truth. He was my agent, my shield, and the only father figure who had ever actually listened to me. "Tell me you are sitting down, Ali," Gideon said. His voice was tinny through the speakers, laced with a static excitement that made my pulse spike. "I am always sitting down. Gideon, I live in a chair. What is the news?" "Nebula Studios," he said. He paused for effect. "They bit. They did not just bite. Ali, they swallowed the hook, the line, and the sinker." I stopped spinning my stylus. Nebula Studios was not just a company. They were the apex predators of the entertainment industry. They were currently developing Project Horizon, a massive, open-world sci-fi franchise that was rumored to be the most expensive media project in history. They had been scouting for a lead concept architect for months. "They want the silent scream character designs?" I asked, my heart hammering against my ribs. "They want everything," Gideon corrected. "They want the characters. They want the environment assets. They want the lore Bible you wrote in the metadata. They want to license the entire Ether aesthetic for the next decade of the franchise." He held up a piece of paper to the camera. It was a printout of a contract. "I negotiated the terms this morning," Gideon said, his grin widening until it looked painful. "Exclusive rights to the Silent Scream collection for use in film, gaming, and merchandise. You retain credit as executive visual consultant. And the fee?" I held my breath. "Tell me." $3,200,000, Gideon said. He enunciated every syllable. "Upfront, plus 5% royalties on all back-end merchandise sales for perpetuity. $3,200,000. The number did not feel real. It sounded like coordinates to a distant planet. I looked around my small apartment. I looked at the peeling paint on the ceiling. I looked at the half-empty cup of coffee from yesterday. $3,200,000 was enough to buy this entire building. It was enough to buy freedom. "Did you hear me, Ali?" Gideon asked, his voice softening. "You did it. You are a millionaire, a multimillionaire." "Send it over," I said. My voice sounded strangely calm, almost robotic. "I will sign it digitally. I already sent it to your secure drive. Read the fine print. But it is solid. I made sure they cannot touch your IP rights for future personal projects. You are protected." I opened the file. The legal language sprawled across my screen, a dense thicket of clauses and subclauses. But there it was, on page 1, the sum of $3,200,000 US. I was staring at the screen, my eyes tracing the zeros, when my phone buzzed on the desk. It was a harsh, jarring vibration that broke the trance. I glanced down. It was a text message. The name on the screen read, Mother. The contrast was so sharp it almost gave me whiplash. On my main monitor, I was finalizing a deal that would alter the trajectory of my entire life. On my phone screen, I was being summoned back to the petty, suffocating reality of the Vale family. I picked up the phone. Alessandra, are you there? The message read, Isabella needs a new sash for her recital dress. The designer charges extra for rush delivery. We are a little tight on cash flow this week due to some bank transfers pending. Send $500 to your sister. Try to be useful for once. I stared at the words. Try to be useful for once. $500. They were asking me for $500 while my father wore watches that cost $50,000. They were pleading poverty because of pending transfers, a transparent lie for anyone who knew how liquidity worked. They were broke, or at least, they were cash poor, drowning in assets they could not sell and a lifestyle they could not sustain. And yet, the arrogance remained. The disdain was still there. She did not ask. She demanded. She assumed that my little freelance gigs, as she called them, could barely scrape together $500, and that asking me for it was a burden on her. I looked back at the contract on the screen. The cursor was blinking on the signature line. I signed the document with a flourish of my digital pen. Then, I opened my banking app. I had a separate account for my day money, the meager savings they thought was my entire net worth. I typed in the amount, $500, in the memo line. Where people usually wrote dinner or rent, I typed, bereavement money for family affection. I hit send. The money whooshed away. $500 gone. A drop in the bucket. A microscopic particle in the ocean of wealth I had just secured. My phone buzzed again a minute later. Received. My mother replied, Why do you always have to be so dramatic with your notes? Bereavement? Nobody died. Alessandra, stop being so morbid. It is just a dress. She did not get it. She did not understand that she was taking money from a ghost. She did not understand that the daughter she thought she was bullying was currently out-earning her husband by a factor of 10. Everything okay? Gideon asked. He was still on the line, watching my face change. Fine, I said, putting the phone face down. Just tying up some loose ends. The contract is signed. Gideon, send it back to Nebula. On it, he said. He typed furiously for a moment. Done. The wire transfer is initiated. It should hit your offshore holding company within 24 hours. Congratulations. Ether, you just won the game. Not yet, I said, staring at the black back of my phone. The game has just started. Gideon signed off, leaving me alone in the blue light. The silence of the apartment returned, but it felt different now. It was not the silence of loneliness. It was the silence of anticipation. My stomach growled. I realized I had not eaten since breakfast. I walked over to the kitchenette, which was really just a hot plate and a sink in the corner of the room. I grabbed a cup of instant noodles, spicy beef flavor, 50 cents a cup, and poured hot water from the kettle. I stood by the window while the noodles cooked, looking out at the brick wall of the adjacent building. I imagined my parents right now. They were probably sitting in the dining room of the Hamptons house, eating Wagyu beef or lobster thermidor. My father was probably pouring a vintage red wine, blustering about his business acumen, terrified that the bank was going to call again. My mother was probably fretting over the cost of a dress sash, unaware that the walls were closing in on them. They were eating gold, but they were starving. I peeled back the lid of my noodle cup. The steam rose up, smelling of artificial spices and sodium. I took a plastic fork and took a bite. It burned my tongue, but it tasted delicious. I checked my bank app again. The pending notification from Nebula Studios was there, a green bar indicating an incoming wire, $3,200,000. I took another bite of noodles. I was eating a 50-cent dinner in a rental apartment. wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt stained with ink. I looked like a college dropout. I looked like a failure. But as I chewed, I smiled. It was a cold, sharp smile that did not quite reach my eyes. I had the money, I had the power, and best of all, I had the element of surprise. They thought I was a pawn. They had no idea I was the one holding the queen. Let them enjoy their lobster. Let them enjoy their illusions. I would enjoy my noodles, because this cup of noodles tasted like victory. The kind of victory that you do not share, the kind you savor, slurping it down one cheap, salty bite at a time, while you watch the world burn from your high tower. The wire transfer completed, the number solidified in my account. I washed the fork in the sink, turned off the lights, and went back to my chair. The screens were waiting. The work was waiting. My parents wanted cash. They wanted to talk about value. Fine, I would show them value. I pulled up the schematics for my next project. It was a series of environments depicting a crumbling empire, a golden city rotting from the inside out. I titled the file, The Veil. I began to draw, and for the first time in my life, every stroke of the stylus felt like I was writing a receipt. While I was busy building a digital empire from my desk in Brooklyn, the physical empire of the Veil family was quietly rotting from the inside out. I learned the specific details of these weeks much later, pieced together from bankruptcy filings, gossip columns, and the eventual tearful confessions of the people involved. But I can visualize the scenes with the clarity of a high-definition render. I know the lighting of that house. I know the smell of the fear that must have permeated the curtains. The rot started at the top. My father, Julian Vale, sat in his study in the Hamptons. It was a room designed to intimidate, filled with leather-bound books he had never opened and hunting trophies he had bought at auctions rather than shot himself. But that afternoon, the predator looked like prey. On the mahogany desk in front of him sat a single sheet of paper from the grandest bank in Manhattan. It was not a polite notice. It was an ultimatum. The text was simple and brutal. Vale Holdings was in default. My father had always prided himself on being a visionary investor. The truth, however, was that he was a gambler with a trust fund. Over the last 3 years, he had poured the family fortune into a series of high-growth real estate developments in Florida. He called them the Azure Coast. He sold the idea to his friends at the club as the next Miami. In reality, he had purchased acres of unbuildable swampland. The contractors had walked off the job 6 months ago. The permits had been revoked. The money, millions of dollars of investors' capital and family equity, had evaporated into the humid Florida air. Now, the bank wanted their pound of flesh. They needed $2 million in liquid cash to cover the margin calls and the immediate debt service if the money was not deposited within 30 days. They would move to seize the collateral. The collateral was everything: the Hamptons house, the Manhattan penthouse, the cars, and worse, they were threatening to open an investigation into financial fraud regarding how he had represented the assets to secure the loans. My father loosened his silk tie. He could feel the sweat trickling down his back. He poured himself a drink, his hands shaking so badly the crystal decanter rattled against the glass. He needed $2 million. He might as well have needed a trip to the moon. He was leveraged to the hilt. Downstairs, my mother was fighting a different kind of war. Elena Vale was sitting in the sunroom, phone pressed to her ear, planning the autumn charity gala. To my mother, perception was reality. If you looked rich, you were rich. If you threw the biggest party, the bank would not dare decline your card. No, you do not understand, she snapped at the florist. I said white hydrangeas, imported from Holland. I do not care about the shipping cost. Just put it on the house account. She hung up and immediately dialed her personal shopper at Bergdorf Goodman. She needed a new gown, something emerald green, something that screamed old money. She had no idea that earlier that morning, her platinum card had been declined at a coffee shop for a $5 latte. She had screamed at the barista, blaming their cheap machine, and used cash. She refused to check the balance. Denial was her drug of choice. But she was not the only one in the house medicating herself. upstairs, in a bedroom that looked like a shrine to a 19th century princess. My sister Isabella was lying on the floor, her violin, a masterpiece of Italian craftsmanship worth more than my entire college tuition, lay in its open case like a corpse in a coffin. Isabella was staring at the ceiling fans spinning round and round. Next to her hand was a small orange bottle of prescription sedatives. She had taken 2 to calm her nerves, and then another one to stop the shaking, and now the world felt soft and fuzzy. The family legend was that Isabella was a musical genius, a prodigy destined for the world stage. The reality was that Isabella was a competent, above-average player who had been pushed beyond her limits since she was 4 years old. She hated the violin. She hated the smell of rosin. She hated the way the chin rest chafed her skin. Under her bed, hidden inside a shoebox, was a letter she had received 2 weeks ago. It was a rejection letter from the orchestra director for the Carnegie Hall showcase. She had failed the final audition. Her technique was described as mechanical and lacking soul. She had not told our parents. How could she? Their entire social identity was built around her success. My father bragged about her golden fingers to every CEO he met. My mother had already bought tickets for half of the Upper East Side to see her debut. If Isabella told them she had failed, the illusion would shatter. So she lied. She told them the conductor loved her. She told them the solos were going well. And every day, she swallowed another pill to silence the screaming voice in her head that told her she was a fraud. That evening, the tension in the house finally broke over dinner. The table was set with silver and fine china, but the meal was silent. The servants moved like shadows, sensing the mood. My father cut his steak with aggressive, violent motions. My mother picked at her salad, frowning at a spot on the tablecloth. Isabella stared at her water glass, her eyes glazed and distant. "We have a problem," my father said. He did not look up from his plate. My mother sighed. "I know, Julian, the florist is being impossible about the hydrangeas." "Forget the damn flowers, Elena," my father roared. He slammed his knife down. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the large room. Isabella flinched, dropping her fork. "We are bleeding," my father said, his voice dropping to a terrifying whisper. "The Florida deal is stuck. The bank is putting pressure on the liquidity. We need an injection of capital, fast." "How much?" my mother asked, her face paling. $2 million, he said, "within 30 days." My mother gasped. She reached for her wine glass. $2 million? Can we not sell some stocks? Or the boat? "The stocks are pledged as collateral," he hissed. "The boat has a lien on it. We are illiquid. Elena, we are asset-rich and cash-poor." Silence descended again. The clock on the mantel ticked loudly. "There is a way," my father said slowly. He took a sip of wine and looked at Isabella. Isabella looked up, her heart pounding sluggishly through the haze of sedatives. "What?" "I had lunch with Archibald Sterling today," my father said. The Sterlings were Texas oil money, new money, loud, crass, and infinitely wealthier than the Vales currently were. They had been trying to break into New York high society for years, but the old guard, people like my mother, had always sneered at them. "Archibald has a son," my father continued. "Rick, he is 28. He is looking to settle down. He wants a wife with pedigree, someone with culture, someone who plays the violin and knows which fork to use." My mother's eyes widened. She understood the game immediately. It was a transaction, a merger. "The Sterlings have been looking for an investment opportunity in the Northeast," my father said, leaning back. "Archibald hinted that if our families were to be aligned, he would be very interested in buying a majority stake in the Florida project. He would cover the debts." Isabella felt the room spin. "Rick Sterling?" she whispered. "The guy who wears cowboy boots with a tuxedo? The one who barely finished high school?" "He is worth $400 million, my father snapped, "and he is willing to pay a premium for a veil." "I am not for sale," Isabella said, her voice trembling. You are a part of this family, my mother interjected, her survival instinct kicking in. You have a duty, Isabella. We have given you everything, the lessons, the instruments, the best schools. Now the family needs you. But I have my career, Isabella pleaded, the lie tasting like ash in her mouth. My debut at Carnegie Hall. You can play your fiddle for him. My father waved his hand dismissively. He will build you a concert hall if you ask him. But we need this marriage. I need you to be charming. We are inviting them over for dinner next Saturday. You will wear the blue dress. You will play something romantic, and you will secure this engagement. Isabella looked at them. She saw the desperation in their eyes. She saw that she was not a daughter to them. She was a livestock asset to be traded to cover a bad bet. What about Alessandra? Isabella asked weakly. It was a deflection, a desperate attempt to shift the target. My father laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. Alessandra? He scoffed. What about her? What does she have to offer? She is a failure. She lives in a slum and draws pictures. Even if we could sell her off, who would buy her? She has no grace, no talent, no value. She is useless to us, my mother agreed. Taking a sip of wine. Do not mention her name to the Sterlings. We do not want them to know we have a defect in the bloodline. A defect, that is what they called me. While they sat in their mortgaged castle plotting to sell their favorite daughter to an oil heir, they dismissed me as a defect. They had absolutely no idea that the defect was currently the only person in the family with a positive net worth. I learned all of this the next morning. I was in my studio, working on the texture rendering for a spaceship hull, when a secure chat window popped up on my third monitor. It was Gideon. Gideon, are you sitting down? Me. I am always sitting down. What is it? Gideon. I have been hearing some interesting whispers from the floor of the exchange, and my friend in risk management at Chase Bank just flagged a file. Me. Talk to me. Gideon. Vale Holdings is underwater. Deep. Your father is on the hook for $2 million in 30 days, or he faces a fraud indictment. The wolves are circling. Ali. I stopped drawing. I stared at the words on the screen. $2 million. I looked at my bank balance. The $3.2 million from Nebula Studios was sitting there. Calm and green and beautiful. I could write a check. I could pick up the phone, call my father, and save them. I could pay off the debt, save the house, and stop them from selling Isabella like a prize heifer. One signature from me, and their nightmare would end. For a moment. The old Alessandra, the little girl who just wanted her daddy to look at her, wrestled with the idea. It would be the ultimate power move. To walk in there and throw the money on the table, to demand their respect. But then I remembered the laughter. I remembered the way he held my painting like it was garbage. I remembered the joke. I remembered them calling me a defect. If I saved them now, they would not learn anything. They would take the money, rationalize it as their due, and go right back to treating me like dirt. They would continue to abuse Isabella. They would continue to live in their delusion. No, I whispered to the empty room. Gideon. Ali? Are you there? Do you want me to intervene? We could buy the debt anonymously. I typed my reply slowly. Me. Do nothing. Gideon. Are you sure? It is going to get ugly. Me. Let it burn. It is not my job to put out a fire they started. I closed the chat window. I picked up my stylus. I went back to work. My parents were drowning, and they were trying to use my sister as a life raft. I was the captain of a passing ship, fully stocked and capable of rescue. But I turned the wheel and sailed on. They wanted reality. They wanted to talk about who was a star and who was a joke. Karma was coming for the Vale family, and I decided I would not be the one to stand in its way. I would watch, and when the dust settled, I would see what was left to buy. The city of New York was buzzing. You could feel it in the electric hum of the subway rails and see it in the frenetic scrolling of pedestrians on Fifth Avenue. The rumor mill had been churning for weeks, fed by cryptic press releases and leaked digital teasers. Nebula Studios, the titan of global entertainment, was partnering with the Museum of Modern Art for a one-night-only gala. The event was titled The Future of Art, but the real draw was the guest of honor, for the first time ever. The elusive digital artist known as Ether was going to reveal a physical collection, and rumor had it, Ether herself, or himself, or them, as the pundits speculated, would finally step into the light. My parents, naturally, knew none of this context. To them, art was only valuable if it was painted by a dead European man or if it matched the upholstery in the drawing room. They did not read gaming forums. They did not follow tech news. They lived in a bubble of dwindling liquidity and rising panic. But they did know one thing: exclusivity. I had asked Gideon to arrange it personally. He sent a courier to the Hamptons estate, a man in a crisp uniform hand-delivering a heavy, cream-colored envelope embossed with gold leaf. Inside was a VIP invitation to the gala, seating for 3 at the platinum table. The face value of those tickets was $50,000 each. To a drowning man, even a floating piece of driftwood looks like a lifeboat. To my parents, that invitation looked like a yacht. I was in my studio, finalizing the lighting sequence for the reveal, when my phone rang. I looked at the screen. Mother, I let it ring 3 times before answering. I wanted to make sure my voice was perfectly calibrated. No anger, no hurt, just the cool, detached professional I had become. "Hello, Mother," I said. "Alessandra," she said, breathless. She sounded manic, the way she always did when she smelled opportunity. "You will not believe what just arrived. We have been invited to the MoMA Gala, the Nebula event." "That sounds nice," I said, typing a command into my keyboard with one hand. "Nice? It is essential," she snapped, reverting to her usual tone. "Everyone will be there. The Vanderbilts, the Rothschilds, the tech billionaires from Silicon Valley. Your father thinks this is the perfect place to find a new partner for the Florida project. We are going to turn this ship around, Alessandra." "I am happy for you," I said. "Yes. Well," she cleared her throat, "that is actually why I am calling. We need you to come." I paused. My fingers hovered over the keys. For a split second, a naive part of me, the little girl who wanted to show them her drawings, wondered if they actually wanted me. Did they want their daughter by their side at a prestigious event? Did they want to include me in the family triumph? "You want me to come?" I asked carefully. "Yes," she said. "We are bringing Isabella. Obviously, we need to introduce her to the right sort of young men. But you know how she gets with her nerves, the crowds, the cameras. She is very fragile right now." "I see," I said. The temperature in my room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "We need someone to manage her," my mother continued, oblivious to the silence on the line. "You know, hold her purse, make sure her gloss is fresh, run to get the car when we are ready to leave. We cannot treat her like a pack mule. Alessandra, she is the talent, and we cannot trust the venue staff with her violin case if she decides to play an impromptu piece. We need family. We need you." They did not want a daughter. They wanted a glorified assistant. They wanted a coat-check girl with the same last name. "So," I said, my voice steady as a surgeon's hand, "you want me to attend the most exclusive event of the decade to hold Isabella's lipstick?" "Do not be difficult," my mother huffed. "It is not like you have anything else to do. You are just sitting in that apartment playing on your computer. Consider it a contribution to the family. God knows you do not contribute financially." The irony was so thick I could almost taste it. I looked at the bank statement on my second monitor. I looked at the contract for the gala, which listed me as the primary beneficiary of the night's auction. "Fine," I said. "I will be there." "Good," she said, relieved. "And Alessandra? Please try to dress adequately. I know you like those thrift store rags, but this is a black tie event. Try to blend in. Maybe wear black, like the staff. We do not want you embarrassing us." "Do not worry. Mother," I said, a small, dark smile touching my lips. "I will be there, and I will be exactly where I belong. Just be at the service entrance by 6, she ordered. We will hand off the violin to you there. Do not be late." She hung up without saying goodbye. I sat there for a moment, listening to the dial tone. Then, I laughed. It was a short, sharp release of pressure. They wanted me to use the service entrance. They wanted me to wear black and blend into the shadows. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I had saved for emergency indulgences. "Atelier Versace," a silky voice answered. "How may we assist you?" "This is the client represented by Gideon Cross," I said. "We spoke last week about the custom commission, the Midnight Nova design." "Ah, yes," the voice instantly warmed. "The piece with the fiber optic threading and the crushed diamond dust. We have the team on standby. Are we proceeding?" "We are proceeding," I said. "But I need a modification. I do not want it to just sparkle. I want it to blind them. I want to look like I own the sky." "Consider it done, madame. The price?" "The price is irrelevant," I cut in. "Just have it ready." The next 48 hours were a blur of preparation. While my parents were likely scrambling to rent tuxedos and borrow jewelry against assets they no longer owned, I was being fitted for a gown that cost more than their luxury sedan. The dress was a masterpiece of engineering as much as fashion. It was a deep, impossible blue, the color of space just before you hit the void. Woven into the fabric were thousands of micro-LEDs and crushed gemstones that caught the light and refracted it, creating the illusion that I was not wearing cloth. But a piece of the galaxy itself. It was structured, architectural, and fiercely modern. It was not a dress for a debutante. It was a uniform for a commander. On the night of the gala, Gideon came to my apartment to pick me up. He was wearing a tuxedo that fit him perfectly, his usual chaotic energy replaced by a solemn, deadly focus. He whistled low when I walked out of the bedroom. "My God," he said softly, "you look dangerous." "That is the point," I said, adjusting the long, sheer gloves that covered my hands, my drawing hands. "I spoke to the venue manager," Gideon said as we walked to the elevator. "Your parents' car is scheduled to arrive at the main red carpet at 7. They think you are waiting at the back door with the caterers." "Let them wait," I said. We rode down in silence. When we stepped out onto the street, a sleek, armored limousine was waiting. Not a rental. It was provided by Nebula Studios for their star. Gideon held the door open for me. I slid into the leather seat, careful with the train of my dress. He climbed in beside me and poured 2 glasses of champagne. "To Ether," he said, raising his glass. "To Alessandra," I corrected, clinking my glass against his. We drove through the city, the lights of Manhattan blurring past the tinted windows. I watched the people on the sidewalks, ordinary people living ordinary lives, and I wondered if they knew that monsters existed. Not the monsters under the bed, but the monsters who sat at your dinner table and told you that you were worthless. As we neared the museum, the traffic thickened. Flashbulbs popped in the distance like lightning. The paparazzi were out in force. This was the night the world would finally see the face behind the art. "Are you nervous?" Gideon asked, watching my hands. "No," I said, and I meant it. I had been nervous when I showed them my painting in the Hamptons. I had been nervous when I waited for their approval. I had been nervous when I was a daughter. But I was not a daughter anymore. I was a force of nature. "They are going to be shocked, Ali," Gideon warned gently. "I do not think you understand the level of cognitive dissonance they are about to experience. They have spent 20 years convincing themselves you are a failure. Seeing you like this might break them." "Good," I said. The word was cold and hard. "Let them break." I looked out the window as we turned the corner toward the museum. I could see the red carpet stretching out, a tongue of crimson velvet under the white-hot glare of the spotlights. I saw the desperate social climbers, the hungry investors, the fading stars, and somewhere in that crowd were Julian and Elena Vale, clutching their fake Hermes bags and their crumbling pride, looking for a servant to hold their coats. "I have waited for this moment since I was 12 years old," I whispered, staring at the lights. "Why 12?" Gideon asked. "That was the year I won the state art competition," I said. the memory surfacing like a shard of glass. I ran home to tell them. I was so proud. I had a gold ribbon. But when I got to the living room, they were toasting Isabella because she had successfully played a scale without screeching. They did not even look at my ribbon. My father used it later to tie up a stack of old newspapers. I took a sip of champagne, the bubbles sharp on my tongue. "Tonight," I said. "They are going to look at the ribbon." The car slowed to a halt. The driver turned around. "We are here. Miss Vale, the red carpet is ready for you." "Wait," Gideon said to the driver. "Give it a minute. Let the anticipation build." He looked at me. "The moment you step out of this car, everything changes. There is no going back to the shadows. You lose your anonymity. You become a public figure. Are you sure?" I looked down at my hands. These hands had created worlds. These hands had generated millions of dollars. These hands had been called useless by the two people who were supposed to hold them. I clenched my fist. The diamonds on my gloves sparkled like a constellation forming. "Open the door," I said. Gideon nodded. He tapped the glass partition. The driver stepped out and walked around the back of the car. The handle turned. The door swung open, and the noise of the crowd rushed in, a roar of voices, camera shutters, and shouting fans. The cool night air hit my face. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of the city and the sweet metallic smell of impending justice. I stepped out. The Museum of Modern Art had been transformed into a cathedral of the future. The usual stark white walls were bathed in shifting, bioluminescent projections that made the architecture feel like it was breathing. The air was cool and smelled of expensive champagne and ozone. This was not just a gala, it was a coronation. I stood near the entrance of the main atrium, a silent observer behind a mask of geometric chrome. The theme of the night was The Faceless Creator, a nod to the digital age where art exists independently of the artist. Everyone was wearing masks, Venetian glass, laser-cut leather, 3D-printed polymers, but mine was different. Mine was a mirror. When people looked at me, they saw their own distorted reflections staring back. My dress, the midnight blue creation from Atelier Versace, was doing exactly what I had paid for. The fiber-optic threads woven into the silk pulsed with a faint, rhythmic light, mimicking the heartbeat of a dying star. I felt armor-plated. I felt invincible. From my vantage point, I watched the sharks circling. The room was filled with the apex predators of New York, the venture capitalists, the tech moguls, the gallery owners who could make or break a career with a single sneeze. And then, I saw the prey enter. My parents and Isabella arrived through the main archway. They were trying so hard. That was the first thing that struck me. My mother, Elena, was wearing the emerald gown she had screamed at her personal shopper to find. It was too tight around the waist, and the color clashed with the futuristic lighting of the room. My father, Julian, wore a tuxedo that looked stiff, his face flushed with a mixture of alcohol and high blood pressure. Isabella trailed behind them in a pale chiffon dress that made her look like a ghost from a different century. But it was the room's reaction to them that was truly fascinating. In the Hamptons, the Vales were royalty. Here, in the cutthroat center of Manhattan finance and culture, they were wounded animals. I saw the CEO of Goldman Sachs glance at my father, then deliberately turn his back to speak to a 20-year-old app developer. I saw a famous art collector spot my mother and suddenly become very interested in her phone. The smell of bankruptcy has a distinct odor in these circles. It smells like desperation, and my parents were reeking of it. The rumors of the Florida disaster had evidently traveled faster than a wire transfer. "Smile," I saw my father hiss at Isabella. I could read his lips perfectly from 20 feet away. "Stop looking like a funeral mute. We are here to make connections." Isabella forced a smile that looked more like a grimace of pain. She clutched her violin case. Why on earth had they made her bring it? As if she expected someone to snatch it, they moved through the crowd. Navigating the sea of tuxedos with a frantic energy, they were hunting for validation, for a friendly face, for anyone who did not know that their credit rating was currently in freefall. Fate, or perhaps my own subconscious positioning, brought them directly toward me. I was standing near a kinetic sculpture, holding a glass of sparkling water. My parents paused right in front of me, not because they recognized me, but because I was blocking their path to the bar. My mother stopped. Her eyes swept over my dress. For a moment, the frantic calculation in her gaze vanished, replaced by genuine, naked envy. She looked at the way the light played off the fabric of my gown. She looked at the confidence in my posture. She looked at the mystery of the chrome mask. "Look at that," she whispered to my father, loud enough for me to hear. "Now, that is how you dress for an occasion like this," my father grunted, his eyes scanning the room for someone more important. "It is just a dress, Elena. It is not just a dress, Julian. It is presence," she snapped. She turned to Isabella and sighed, a sound of profound disappointment. "Isabella, look at her. Look at how she stands, straight back, chin up. Why can you not carry yourself like that? Why must you always slump?" "I am tired, Mother," Isabella murmured, shifting the heavy violin case. "Excuses," my mother hissed. Then she looked back at me, her eyes filled with a longing that almost made me pity her. "I wish Alessandra had even 1/10 of that grace. If our other daughter looked like that, maybe we could have married her off to someone decent instead of hiding her away." I felt a cold laugh bubbling up in my chest. It was a dark, twisted delight. She was wishing I was me. She was admiring the shell while despising the soul. "Excuse me," my father said to me, his voice adopting that oily, charming tone he reserved for people he thought were wealthy. "Wonderful evening, isn't it? Are you a friend of the curator?" He was fishing. He wanted to know if I was someone worth knowing, if I was a potential investor. I decided it was time. I reached up with my gloved hand. The diamonds on the fabric caught the overhead lights, sending a spray of sparkles across my father's face. I unclasped the hidden latch behind my head. Slowly, deliberately, I lowered the chrome mask. I let it rest in my hand. I lifted my glass of water and took a sip, letting the silence stretch out until it was thin enough to snap. Then, I looked directly into my father's eyes. "Hello, Father," I said. "Hello, Mother." The reaction was immediate and visceral. My father's face went slack. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. It was as if his brain could not process the visual data. The glamorous, mysterious stranger in the couture gown was not a foreign princess or a tech billionaire. It was the joke. It was the failure. My mother actually took a step back, her hand flying to her throat. "Alessandra?" she gasped. "What, how?" Then, the shock morphed instantly into anger. The transition was terrifyingly smooth. They did not feel pride. They did not feel relief. They felt deceived. They felt that I had tricked them. My father lunged forward. He grabbed my upper arm, his fingers digging into the expensive fabric of my sleeve. He did not care about the scene. He dragged me away from the sculpture, pulling me into a shadowed alcove near the emergency exit. "What the hell are you doing?" he snarled, his face inches from mine. The smell of scotch was overpowering. "Are you insane?" I yanked my arm free from his grip. I dusted off the sleeve where he had touched me, a gesture of supreme disrespect that made his eyes bulge. "I am attending a party," I said calmly. "I believe I was invited, or rather, I was told to come and park cars." "Where did you get that dress?" my father demanded, his voice a harsh whisper. He looked me up and down with disgust. "Did you steal it? Did you rent it?" "It is custom," I said. "Custom?" He let out a bark of incredulous laughter. "Do not lie to me. That dress costs more than your life. Who paid for it? Are you sleeping with someone? Is that it? Did you find some old senile fool to play sugar daddy so you could play dress up?" "Julian, keep your voice down," my mother hissed, looking around frantically to see if anyone was watching. She turned her glare on me. "Alessandra, you need to leave, right now. Go change into something appropriate. You look ridiculous. You look like you're trying to be something you are not." "And what am I not, Mother?" I asked. "Successful? Meaningful? You are a distraction," she spat. "We are here for Isabella. This is a night for serious people, for high culture, not for your little costume games. If people find out you are our daughter, dressed like a showgirl, they will think we are frivolous." Isabella stepped forward. She looked at me with wet, glassy eyes. The jealousy was radiating off her like heat waves. She looked at the way the light danced on my dress, and then she looked down at her own pale, boring gown. "Take it off, Ali," she whined. "Please, you are embarrassing yourself. You do not belong here. This is the Museum of Modern Art. It is for real artists, for musicians, for painters, not for whatever you do. Real artists," I repeated, tasting the words. "Is that what you are, Isabella? A real artist?" "I am going to play at Carnegie Hall," she blurted out, repeating the lie she had been fed. "I am a virtuoso." "You are a girl holding a violin you hate," I said softly. "And you," I turned to my parents, "are two people standing on a precipice, screaming at the only person who has a parachute." "Do not speak to us like that." My father raised his hand, as if to strike me, but stopped himself. He was too cowardly to do it in public. "Get out. Go to the service entrance. Wait by the car. If I see you on the main floor again, I will have security throw you out into the street." "You want security?" I asked. I looked over my father's shoulder. Two large men in black suits were approaching. They wore earpieces and the stern expressions of professionals who handled billionaires and heads of state. They were moving with purpose toward our alcove. My mother's face paled. "Oh God, Julian, they saw us arguing. They are coming to kick us out." "It is her fault," my father hissed, pointing a trembling finger at me. "She caused a scene." The guards stopped 3 feet away. They were towering figures, imposing and scary. My father straightened his spine, preparing to beg, preparing to blame his wayward daughter for the disturbance. "Officers," my father began, his voice quivering, "I apologize. This young woman is mentally unstable. She is leaving immediately. We are the Vales. We are VIP guests." The lead guard ignored him completely. He did not even look at my father. He looked directly at me, and then he bowed. It was not a deep, theatrical bow. It was a crisp, respectful nod of the head, a gesture of deference reserved for the person who signs the checks. "Miss Vale," the guard said, his voice deep and polite. "Is everything all right here? We noticed some aggressive body language from these guests. Do you require assistance?" My parents froze. The world tilted on its axis. My mother's mouth fell open. My father looked from the guard to me and back to the guard, his brain misfiring. "These guests?" my father sputtered. "We are her parents. We are the Vales." "What are you talking about? She is the one who—" "I asked Miss Vale," the guard said, cutting him off with a look that could freeze magma. He kept his eyes on me. "Ma'am, shall we escort them to a different sector?" I looked at my parents. I saw the confusion, the fear, and the dawning realization that something was terribly, terribly wrong with their understanding of the universe. They were waiting for me to explain. They were waiting for me to tell the guard that they were in charge. I slowly raised my mask again. I clipped it into place, hiding my face, hiding my humanity, becoming the mirror once more. "No," I said, my voice amplified slightly by the acoustics of the mask. "Let them stay. They are harmless." "Very good, ma'am," the guard said. "The curator is ready for you in the green room whenever you wish to ascend to the stage." "Thank you," I said. I turned back to my family. They looked small now, insignificant. "You said I looked like a joke," I said, my voice low and distorted by the mask. "You said I was a waste of electricity. Well, father, mother, Isabella, enjoy the show, but do not blink, and keep your eyes on the stage. Wait and see who the joke is tonight." I turned on my heel, the fiber optic dress swirling around me like a nebula. I walked away, flanked by the security guards. "Wait," my father called out, his voice cracking. "Alessandra, what does he mean?" The stage. Alessandra. I did not look back. I walked toward the VIP elevators, leaving them standing in the shadows of the alcove, three confused ghosts haunting a party that no longer belonged to them. As the elevator doors closed, the last thing I saw was Isabella clutching her violin, looking at me with a mixture of hatred and terrified awe. The ascent had begun. The lights in the main atrium dimmed, descending from a bright, sterile white to a deep, resonant violet. The ambient chatter of the crowd, which had been a roar of networking and gossip, instantly hushed. It was a physical silence, heavy and expectant. The air conditioner hummed, a low drone that sounded like the engine of a starship preparing for launch. I had slipped back onto the main floor. The security guards had offered me a private box, a glass-walled sanctuary above the fray where I could watch the proceedings like a queen in her tower. But I declined. I did not want to be above them, not yet. I wanted to be down in the trenches. I wanted to be close enough to smell the fear on my father's cheap cologne and see the pulse jumping in my mother's neck. I positioned myself just a few feet behind them, hidden in the shadows of a marble pillar, my mask still firmly in place. My parents and Isabella stood in a tight, defensive triangle near the center of the room. They looked lost. The crowd had pushed them to the periphery, but they held their ground, desperate to be seen, desperate to belong. My father was scanning the room, likely looking for a waiter to bring him another scotch to numb the confusion of our earlier encounter. He still did not understand what had happened. He thought I was playing a prank. He thought I was a trespasser in a stolen dress. A single spotlight cut through the darkness, illuminating the podium at the front of the room. A man stepped into the light. It was Aurelius Vance, the most famous auctioneer in the world. He was a man who could sell sand to a desert nomad. A man whose voice was pure velvet wrapped around steel. "Ladies and gentlemen," Vance began, his voice booming through the hidden speakers. "Distinguished guests, titans of industry, welcome to the future." The screen behind him, a massive LED wall that spanned 50 feet, flickered to life. The logo of Nebula Studios pulsed in sync with a deep bass throb that shook the floorboards. "Tonight," Vance continued, gripping the sides of the podium, "we are not just selling art, we are selling a piece of a soul. We are selling a window into a digital consciousness that has captivated the world for 5 years. Tonight, for the first time in history, we offer the original, non-fungible, and physical masterworks of the artist known only as Ether." A ripple went through the crowd. I saw heads turn. I saw phones light up. The anticipation was palpable. "The collection is titled The Silent Scream," Vance announced. "It is a study of isolation, of the coldness that can exist within the warmest colors, of the poverty that can exist within the greatest wealth." My mother adjusted her shawl. I saw her lean toward my father. "The Silent Scream?" she whispered loud enough for me to hear. "Sounds depressing. Who would buy something like that?" "Some liberal nonsense," my father muttered back, checking his watch. "Let us hope they serve dinner soon. I am starving." "Behold," Vance commanded. "Lot number 1. The massive screen behind him exploded with color. The image that appeared was 10 feet tall. It was a digital painting, rendered in hyper-realistic 8K resolution. It depicted a long mahogany dining table, stretching out into an infinite, dark void. At the head of the table sat a man and a woman. They were grotesque, exaggerated caricatures, their faces stretched into permanent, plastic smiles. They were eating gold coins with forks and knives, while blood dripped from the corners of their mouths. But it was the background that mattered. The wallpaper in the painting was a specific, damask pattern of deep burgundy and gold. The chandelier hanging above the table was a distinct, multi-tiered crystal fixture with a missing teardrop on the left side. It was our dining room. I watched the blood drain from my mother's face. It happened in slow motion. Her hand, which had been patting her hair, froze in midair. She squinted at the screen, her brain trying to reject the visual information. "Julian," she hissed. "Julian, Look at the chandelier. My father looked up. He squinted. Then, his eyes widened. He recognized the wallpaper. He recognized the specific curve of the chairs. He recognized the face of the man eating gold. The silver hair. The heavy brow. It was a distorted, monstrous version of himself. "What the devil?" my father stammered. "That looks like our house." The image on the screen changed. It was the second piece in the collection. This one showed a young girl standing on a stage. She was wearing a pink dress that was slightly too small for her. She held a violin, but the strings of the violin were not strings at all. They were barbed wire. The wire was wrapped around her fingers, cutting into the skin, and the blood was dripping down onto the stage, forming a puddle that reflected the faces of a laughing audience. Isabella let out a small, strangled gasp. She recognized the dress. It was the dress she had worn for her 12th birthday recital, the recital where she had forgotten the notes and my father had refused to speak to her for 3 days. "That is me," Isabella whispered, her voice trembling. "Mother, that is me." "Don't be stupid," my father snapped, though his voice lacked its usual authority. "It is a coincidence, a generic image. Lots of people play the violin." "The bidding for the complete collection begins now," Vance's voice cut through their panic. "We are opening the floor at $500,000, my father scoffed. It was a loud, derisive sound that caused people nearby to turn and glare. "500,000? He laughed, shaking his head. "For that? For a computer drawing of a dining room? This is a joke. Who would pay $500,000 for this trash?" "500,000, a voice called out from the front row. It was the representative for a major hedge fund. "I have 500,000, Vance said smoothly. "Do I hear 750? "750, a paddle went up on the left. $1 million, a woman in the back shouted. My father choked. He actually choked on his own saliva. He grabbed my mother's arm to steady himself. "Did you hear that?" he whispered hoarsely. $1 million? Elena, that is insanity. That is money laundering. It has to be. $1 million is the bid, Vance cried, the excitement building in his voice. "We are looking for 1,200,000. 1.2, came a calm voice near the bar. 1.5, countered the hedge fund manager. The numbers were flying through the air like invisible missiles. $1,500,000. That was almost exactly the amount of debt my father was currently drowning in. That was the number that was going to cost him his company, and here were people throwing it at a screen, fighting for the privilege to own a picture of his own dining room. "Who painted this?" my mother asked, her voice shrill with panic. "Julian, someone has been in our house. We have a stalker. We need to call the police." "Quiet, Elena," my father hissed. He was mesmerized by the numbers. He was watching his salvation float by, attached to art he deemed worthless. "Just watch." $2 million, said a man in a gray suit. $2 million, Vance shouted. "We are at $2 million for the silent scream." My father's knees buckled slightly. $2 million. The exact figure the bank demanded. The exact figure that stood between him and prison. "It is just pixels," my father muttered, his face gray. "It is just lights on a screen." "Why? Why is it worth this?" "Because it is real, Julian," I whispered to myself. "Because it tells the truth." 2,500,000, a new voice entered the fray. It was a young tech billionaire, wearing a hoodie under his blazer. The room gasped. 2.5 million, Vance repeated. Going once. $3 million, a deep, accented voice cut through the room. All heads turned to the center of the room. A man stood there, holding paddle number 707. He was the cultural attaché for the Royal Museum of Dubai. He did not shout. He did not wave his paddle frantically. He simply stated the number as if he were ordering a coffee. $3 million, the man repeated. "And we would like to offer an immediate exhibition in our new digital wing." My father looked like he was having a stroke. He was clutching his chest. $3 million. He was looking at a sum of money that could rebuild his entire empire, and it was being offered for pictures that mocked his very existence. "I have $3 million from the gentleman from Dubai," Vance said, scanning the room. "Do I hear 3.2?" The room was silent. The tension was so thick you could choke on it. "3.2 million, the tech billionaire said, his voice straining slightly. 3.5. The Dubai representative shot back instantly. No hesitation, no mercy. Wait, I paused. The outline said 3.2. I realized the momentum had carried the room further, but the final hammer had to fall. $3.2 million, the Dubai representative corrected himself, realizing he had jumped the gun on his own bid limit, or perhaps simply restating his final offer to close the door. "My final offer, $3,200,000. The room held its breath. The tech billionaire shook his head and lowered his paddle. "Going once," Vance chanted. "Going twice. Sold. To the Royal Museum for $3,200,000. The gavel came down with a crack that sounded like a pistol shot. The room erupted. Thunderous applause filled the atrium. People were cheering, whistling, clapping until their hands hurt. My father did not clap. He stood there, frozen, a statue of disbelief. He looked at my mother. She was weeping, but not tears of joy. She was weeping because she understood, on some primal level, that she had missed something vital. $3 million, my father whispered. For that. Vance raised his hands, quieting the crowd. The lights shifted again, focusing entirely on the empty stage. "And now," Vance said, his voice lowering to a reverent hush, "the moment we have all been waiting for. The contract for this sale requires the artist to acknowledge the purchase. Ladies and gentlemen, the creator of the silent scream has walked among us tonight as a ghost. But now, it is time for the ghost to become flesh." He gestured to the floor. "Please welcome to the stage the artist known as Ether." A spotlight, bright and blinding white, swung down from the ceiling. It swept across the crowd like the eye of God. It moved over the faces of the bankers, the actors, the socialites. My father looked around nervously. "Who is it?" he muttered. "Probably that kid in the hoodie." The spotlight kept moving. It swept past the bar. It swept past the entrance. And then, it stopped. It stopped directly on me. I was standing 3 feet to the left of my father. The light hit me with the force of a physical blow. My dress, the midnight nova, exploded into brilliance under the direct beam. The diamonds flared. The fiber optics pulsed. I became a pillar of blue fire in the center of the dark room. My father squinted against the glare. He raised a hand to shield his eyes. He looked at the person standing in the spotlight. He looked at the dress he had called a costume. He looked at the mask he had called ridiculous. The room went silent again. Everyone was looking at me. Slowly, deliberately. I reached up. I unclipped the chrome mask for the second time that night. I let it fall from my hand. It hit the marble floor with a loud, metallic clatter. I turned my head and looked directly at my father. His face was bathed in the peripheral glow of my spotlight. I saw his eyes widen until the whites showed all around the irises. I saw his jaw unhinge. "Alessandra?" he whispered. The word was barely a breath. It was a prayer of confusion. I did not answer him. I did not smile. I simply held his gaze for one long, excruciating second. Then, I turned away from him. I walked toward the stage. The crowd parted for me like the Red Sea. As I walked, the applause started again, louder this time, deafening. But I could still hear the sound of my father's voice behind me, rising in a scream of pure, unadulterated horror. "No!" he shouted, his voice cracking. "That is my daughter. That is Alessandra. That is a mistake." But nobody was listening to him anymore. They were only looking at the star. The spotlight was a physical weight, heavy and hot, pinning me to the marble floor. For a split second, time seemed to warp. The applause from the auction had died down into a confused murmur as the audience tried to reconcile the image of the famous digital artist Ether with the young woman standing in the shadows of the Vale family. My father, Julian, was the first to break the paralysis. His brain, frantically trying to protect his ego, rejected the evidence before his eyes. He could not accept that the failure he had berated for years was the star of the evening. Therefore, in his logic, it had to be a mistake, a lighting error, a technical glitch. He grabbed my shoulder, his grip rough and desperate. "Move," he hissed, his voice trembling with a mix of panic and authority. "You are blocking the light. Get out of the way. Alessandra, they must be aiming for Isabella. They know she is the musician." He actually tried to shove me. He tried to push me back into the darkness, back into the corner where he believed I belonged. He turned to Isabella, grabbing her arm with his other hand. "Step forward," he commanded her. "Smile, Isabella. The light is for you. They want the prodigy." Isabella blinked, blinded by the glare, looking like a deer caught in the headlights of a semi-truck. She took a hesitant step forward, clutching her violin case, desperate to believe him, desperate to believe that she was still the golden child. I did not budge. I planted my heels in the marble. I looked at my father's hand on my shoulder. Then I looked up at his face. "No," I said. It was not a whisper. It was a command. I shrugged his hand off my shoulder with a sharp, violent twist of my body. The movement caused the crystals on my dress to flare, sending a cascade of blue light rippling across his face. He stumbled back, shocked by the physical rejection. "The light is not for her," I said, my voice cold and clear. "It is for the artist." I turned my back on them. I did not look to see their reaction. I simply started walking. I walked out of the shadows and into the center aisle. The spotlight followed me. It locked onto me like a guidance system. Every step I took was amplified by the acoustics of the atrium, the rustle of my gown, the click of my heels, the intake of breath from 500 people. As I ascended the stairs to the stage, the silence in the room broke. It started with Gideon, standing in the wings, clapping his hands high above his head. Then the buyer from Dubai joined in, then the tech billionaire, and suddenly, the entire room erupted. It was a wave of sound that crashed over me, washing away 24 years of insults. It was the sound of validation. I reached the center of the stage. Aurelius Vance, the auctioneer, stepped back, bowing low and offering me the microphone. He looked at me with genuine reverence. "Ladies and gentlemen," Vance shouted over the applause, "Ether." I took the microphone. I stood there for a moment, letting the adulation soak in. I looked out at the sea of faces. I saw the envy, the admiration, the curiosity, and then I looked at the giant LED screens flanking the stage. The camera operators were ruthless. They knew where the drama was. They had cut to a live feed of the front row, but they had also found the Vale family standing near the back. My parents' faces were broadcast 20 feet high in high definition. My father looked like a man who had been hollowed out. His skin was the color of old parchment. His mouth hung open, slack and trembling. My mother was gripping her fake Hermes bag so tightly her knuckles were white, her eyes wide with a mixture of greed and terror. And Isabella looked small. She looked like a child who had realized her favorite toy was broken. I raised the microphone to my lips. The room fell silent instantly. "Thank you," I said. My voice was amplified, booming through the hall, powerful and undeniable. "It is an honor to be here, tonight. You bid on a collection titled The Silent Scream. Many of you asked about the inspiration behind the pieces. You asked about the loneliness in the brushstrokes. You asked about the anger in the colors." I paused. I locked eyes with the camera lens that I knew was broadcasting directly to the screen behind me. "I grew up in a house where art was considered a waste of electricity," I said. "I grew up being told that my passion was a joke. I was told that unless I played a violin or married a bank account, I had no value. I was the punchline of every family dinner." A ripple of murmurs went through the crowd. People turned to look at the Vales. My father shrank back, trying to hide behind a pillar. But here is the thing about jokes, I continued, my voice hardening. If you tell them often enough, the punchline changes. I took every insult, every laugh, every moment of neglect, and I put it into the canvas. I turned their cruelty into currency. So, I want to thank the people who did not believe in me. I pointed directly at the screen where my parents' terrified faces were frozen. Thank you, I said, because without your coldness, I never would have learned how to burn this bright. The applause this time was different. It was not just polite clapping. It was a roar of approval. The audience loved a redemption story. They loved a rebel. Then, Gideon walked onto the stage. He was grinning so wide I thought his face might split. He was carrying a large ceremonial check, the kind used for press photos. He held it up for the cameras. The numbers were written in bold. Black ink. $3,200,000. But it was the pay to line that caused the final gasp. It did not say Ether. It did not say anonymous. It read, in clear, block letters, Alessandra Vale. Gideon handed me the check. It is all yours, kid, he whispered. Every cent. I held the check up. The flashbulbs went off like a supernova. I was blinded by the white light. But I didn't care. I felt light. I felt unburdened. The camera cut back to the floor. The reaction was immediate and brutal. The people standing around my parents, the bankers, the investors, the social climbers my father had been trying to impress all night, were now looking at them with open disgust. I saw a well-known venture capitalist lean away from my father as if poverty were contagious. I saw the woman who had been admiring my mother's dress turn her back on her. They were whispering, "That is the father?" I could read their lips. He called Ether a joke? What an idiot! He missed out on the biggest talent of the decade. And to think, I was going to invest in his Florida project. If he cannot spot value in his own house, how can he manage my portfolio? My father heard them. He looked around, his eyes darting from face to face. Seeing his reputation disintegrate in real time, the mask of the powerful patriarch crumbled. He looked pathetic. He reached out to grab the arm of a man he knew, pleading his case, but the man shook him off and walked away. And then, Isabella broke. It was too much for her. The pressure, the lies, the sedatives, and now this. The ultimate humiliation of being outshone by the sister she had been trained to pity. She dropped her violin case. It hit the floor with a loud thud that echoed in the brief silence between claps. She brought her hands to her face and let out a sob that was captured by a nearby microphone. It was a raw, ugly sound. She collapsed onto her knees right there in the middle of the ballroom, weeping into her chiffon skirt. "It is not fair," she screamed, her voice shrill and hysterical. "I am the star. I am the special one." My mother tried to hush her, tried to pull her up, but it was too late. The illusion was shattered. The perfect Vale family was revealed for what it was, a mess of insecurity, debt, and jealousy. I stood on the stage, holding my $3 million check, and looked down at them. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. I expected to feel pity. I expected to feel sad for my sister, who was clearly having a mental breakdown, but I did not. I felt clean. I turned to Gideon. "Is the car ready?" "The engine is running," he said. "Good," I said into the microphone, addressing the room one last time. "Thank you all for coming. And to my family, do not worry about the check. I know how to manage my own assets now." I walked off the stage to the sound of thunder, leaving the Vales drowning in the flood of my success. The truth had been exposed, and it was worth exactly $3,200,000. The adrenaline from the stage was still coursing through my veins, a cold and electric fire. As I walked down the long, carpeted corridor leading to the VIP exit, the noise of the gala, the applause, the clinking glasses, the whispers of the elite, faded behind the heavy, soundproof doors. I was flanked by 2 security guards, the same ones who had bowed to me earlier. Gideon walked beside me, clutching the ceremonial check as if it were the Holy Grail. "That was," Gideon said, shaking his head and chuckling, "the most brutal thing I have ever witnessed, and I once saw a gallery owner tell a painter to burn his canvas. You did not just mic drop, Ali, you dropped the whole building." "It is not over," I said, my voice steady. "They are still here." "Who?" "The vultures." As if summoned by my words, the double doors at the end of the hallway burst open. They were waiting for me. Of course they were waiting. They had probably sprinted from the ballroom, bypassing the coat check, ignoring the confused stares of the people they had been trying to impress, just to cut me off before I could reach my car. My father, Julian, stood in the center, trying to regain his composure. He had buttoned his tuxedo jacket, but it was misaligned. His face was flushed, a map of broken capillaries and desperation. My mother, Elena, was dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief that looked dry. Isabella stood slightly behind them, her face puffy and red from her earlier tantrum, clutching her violin case like a weapon. The security guards stepped forward, their hands moving to their waists, but I held up a hand. "It is fine," I said. "Give us a moment." The guards hesitated, then stepped back a few paces, crossing their arms. Gideon leaned against the wall, watching with the intense fascination of a scientist observing lab rats. I stopped 10 feet away from them. I did not speak. I let the silence stretch. I let them look at the dress they had despised. I let them look at the woman they had called a failure. My mother was the first to break. She rushed forward, arms wide open, her face twisted into a grotesque mask of maternal pride. "Alessandra!" she cried, her voice trembling with emotion that felt about as authentic as her handbag. "Oh, my baby! My brilliant, brilliant girl!" She tried to hug me. I took a sharp step back. She froze, her arms hovering in the empty air, looking hurt. "Don't," I said. "Ali, darling," she said, lowering her arms but keeping that watery, pleading smile plastered on her face. "Why are you being so cold? We are so proud of you. Did you see your father's face?" We were overcome with emotion. "Just overcome!" She looked at Julian for backup. "Yes," my father cleared his throat. Stepping forward, he tried to adopt his usual posture of authority, puffing out his chest, but his eyes kept darting to the oversized check Gideon was holding. "It was quite a surprise. Alessandra, quite a surprise indeed. We had no idea you were operating at this level." "Operating?" I repeated. "Is that what we are calling it now? An hour ago? It was scribbles. It was a waste of electricity." "Oh, stop it." My mother waved her hand dismissively, forcing a laugh. "You know how we joke. We are a family. We roast each other. It is how we show love. And besides," her voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper, "I was only being hard on you because I knew you had it in you. I knew if I pushed you, if I made you angry, you would fight harder. It was a strategy, sweetheart, a mother's intuition. I was the wind beneath your wings, even if it felt like a storm." I stared at her. The audacity was breathtaking. She was actually trying to take credit for my success by claiming her abuse was a motivational technique. "So," I said, "when you told me my art was only good for lining bird cages, that was encouragement?" "Tough love," she beamed, nodding vigorously. "And look, it worked. You are a star, just like we always wanted." Isabella stepped out from behind my father. She had wiped her face, and now she was looking at me with wide, puppy dog eyes. The jealousy from the ballroom had been shoved down, replaced by a sudden, opportunistic affection. "Ali," she said, her voice small and sweet. "I am sorry I yelled earlier. I was just overwhelmed by your talent. Really. I mean, $3 million? That is amazing." She took a step closer, smiling. "You know," she continued, "I was thinking, remember when we were little, and we promised to always take care of each other? You always said you would buy me the best violin in the world if you ever got rich." I raised an eyebrow. "I said that when I was 6, Isabella, before you started laughing at me with them. But I need a Stradivarius, she pleaded, ignoring my comment. There is one coming up for auction next month. It is only $1 million. If I had that violin, Ali, I know I could make it to Carnegie Hall. It is the instrument holding me back, not me. You can help me. You are the best sister. We can be a power duo. The Vale sisters. The Vale sisters, I echoed. The star and the joke. Is that the duo? Alessandra, be reasonable, my father cut in, his patience fraying. He stepped between us, assuming command. Enough of this emotional talk. We need to discuss business. He gestured to the check again. $3,200,000, he said, saying the number with a reverence he had never shown me. That is a significant amount of capital, Alessandra, and frankly, you are young, you are an artist, you have no experience with wealth management. The tax implications alone are a nightmare. You could lose half of that to the IRS if you're not careful. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. His card, even though I was his daughter. I am prepared to step in, he said, puffing up. I will take over the management of this portfolio for you. I will shelter the assets in Vale Holdings. We can invest it. I can triple that money in 5 years. You just sign the power of attorney over to me, and I will handle the headaches. You just go back to drawing your pictures. He reached out a hand, as if expecting me to shake it, as if this were a deal he was closing at a country club lunch. I looked at his hand. It was shaking, a fine, telltale tremor of a man who was terrified. You want to manage my money? I asked softly. I am your father, he said. It is my duty to protect you. Protect me? I laughed. It was a dry, sharp sound. Father, your company is in default. You owe the bank $2 million. You are 30 days away from being indicted for fraud. You invested in swampland in Florida. My father's face went white. My mother gasped. How? He stammered. How do you know that? I know everything, I said. I know about the foreclosure notice on the house. I know about the maxed-out credit cards. I know you are trying to sell Isabella to the Sterling family like a broodmare to cover your debts. Isabella turned to him, her eyes wide. What? Sell me? Shut up, Isabella, he snapped, losing his composure completely. He turned back to me, his eyes narrowing into slits. You have been spying on us? I have been paying attention, I corrected. Something you never did with me. Then you know, he said, his voice dropping to a growl. You know we are in trouble. You know this family is on the brink. I know you are on the brink, I said. I am doing just fine, I signaled to Gideon. Let's go. I tried to step around them, but my father moved. He blocked the path, spreading his arms wide. The mask of the concerned parent fell away completely. The mask of the savvy businessman shattered. What was left was a bully, a desperate, cornered bully. You are not going anywhere, he snarled. Julian, my mother cried, looking at the security guards who were now unholstering their tasers. Stop it! No, he shouted. He pointed a finger in my face. I raised you. I put a roof over your head. I fed you. You owe me. You owe this house. I owe you nothing, I said calmly. I paid for my own college with scholarships. I paid for my own apartment. I paid for my own food for the last 3 years because you cut me off. I am your father, he screamed, spit flying from his mouth. And I command you to help this family. My company is bleeding. We are going to lose the estate. We are going to be on the street. And you are standing there in a dress that costs more than my car, holding a check for $3 million. And you refuse to help? You ungrateful little wretch. He took a breath, his chest heaving. I need $2 million, he demanded. Right now, tonight, you will transfer it to the Vale Holdings account. Consider it repayment for your childhood. Consider it the price of admission to this family. And if I don't? I asked. Then you are dead to us, he spat. You are no daughter of mine. I looked at him. I looked at the sweat on his forehead. I looked at the vein throbbing in his neck. I looked at my mother, who was nodding in agreement, her eyes hard and greedy. I looked at Isabella, who was looking at the check with hunger. Not love. They did not see me. They had never saw me. Even now, standing in the light of my greatest achievement, all they saw was an ATM machine. I was already dead to you, I said quietly. I was dead the moment I picked up a stylus instead of a violin. I was dead when you called me a joke in front of 500 people. I took a step closer to him, invading his space. He flinched, surprised by my aggression. You say I owe you for my childhood? I asked. Fine, let's calculate the bill. You provided food and shelter. I provided a punching bag for your insecurities. I provided a scapegoat for your failures. I think we are even. $2 million, he repeated, his voice cracking. Just give us the money, Alessandra. Don't be a monster. A monster? I smiled. It was the smile of the wolf in the fairy tale. You wanted a realist, didn't you? Mother, you told me to stop living in a fantasy world. Well, here is reality. I leaned in close, so only they could hear the whisper. You do not want me. You want my wallet. You want to take the fruit of my useless scribbles and pour it into the black hole of your incompetence. You want me to save you from your own stupidity. Yes, he shouted. Yes, that is what family does. Not this family, I said. This family eats its young. I turned to the security guards. Gentlemen, I said, these people are harassing me. Please remove them from the exit. With pleasure, Miss Vale, the lead guard said. He stepped forward, his hand heavy on my father's shoulder. Sir, step aside. Now. Get your hands off me, my father shouted, struggling. Do you know who I am? I am Julian Vale. You are blocking the exit, the guard said, shoving him aside with effortless strength. My father stumbled back, crashing into the wall. My mother screamed. Isabella shrank back, terrified. I walked past them. I walked with my head high, the train of my dress gliding over the carpet. Alessandra, my mother wailed, dropping the act entirely. Please, we will lose the house. Where will we live? I stopped at the door. I did not turn around. You figure it out, I said. You are the smart ones. You are the stars. I am just a joke, remember? And jokes don't write checks. I pushed the doors open and walked out into the cool night air, leaving their screams echoing in the empty hallway behind me. The morning sun hit the glass facade of the Blackwood and Sterling law firm with a blinding intensity. From the 45th floor, Manhattan looked like a circuit board, a grid of power and electricity that hummed beneath my feet. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, looking down at the ants scurrying on the pavement below. I held a cup of black coffee, the ceramic warm against my palms. I was wearing a tailored white suit, sharp enough to cut glass, a stark contrast to the midnight blue galaxy I had worn the night before. I was not tired. I had not slept. But I was not tired. The adrenaline had crystallized into a cold, hard focus. They are here, Ms. Vale, the receptionist said through the intercom. Shall I send them in? Send them in, I said. And make sure the door is closed behind them. I turned around and took my seat at the head of the long obsidian conference table. My lawyer, Mr. Arthur Blackwood, sat to my right. He was a man who smiled with his teeth, but never with his eyes. A shark in a three-piece suit who specialized in hostile takeovers and asset liquidation. On the table in front of us sat a single, thick leather folder. The double doors opened. My parents walked in first, followed closely by Isabella. They looked like the survivors of a shipwreck who had just spotted land. My father, Julian, was wearing a suit that was slightly wrinkled, likely pulled from the back of his closet in a panic. His eyes were bloodshot, but there was a swagger in his walk that I recognized. It was the swagger of a man who thought he had won. My mother, Elena, had dropped the weeping act from the night before. She had put on fresh makeup and her best pearls, looking around the expensive office with a critical, appraising eye, calculating the hourly rate of the view. Isabella looked exhausted, She was wearing jeans and a sweater, hugging herself, looking small and sullen. "Alessandra," my father said, booming as he entered. He walked straight to the chair opposite me and pulled it out with a flourish. "Good morning. I must say, this is a very impressive firm. I used to do business with old Blackwood Sr. back in the 80s. Glad to see you are finally seeking proper counsel." He sat down, and my mother and sister flanked him. They settled in, exuding an air of expectant entitlement. They thought they knew why they were here. They thought the talk last night had worked. They believed that I, the dutiful daughter, had come to my senses and was preparing to cut them a check to save the family name. "I am glad you called us so early," my mother added, smoothing her skirt. "We have a lot of calls to make to the bank before noon. The interest payments are compounding. You know, we need to move that capital quickly." My father drummed his fingers on the table. "So, where is the paperwork? I assume you are setting up a trust? Or is it a direct wire transfer? I can give you the routing number for Vale Holdings right now." He reached into his pocket for his phone. I watched him for a moment. I watched the arrogance, the utter lack of humility. After everything, after the insults, after the public humiliation, after being exposed as frauds, they still thought they were the ones in charge. They still thought I was the child, and they were the masters. "Put the phone away, Julian," I said softly. My father paused. He frowned at the use of his first name. "Excuse me?" "I said put it away," I repeated. "We are not transferring any money to Vale Holdings today." The room went deadly silent. The air conditioner hummed. My mother's smile faltered, the corners of her mouth twitching. "What do you mean?" my father asked slowly, his voice dropping an octave. "You said we were here to resolve the situation. You said you wanted to settle things." "I am here to settle things," I said. "Mr. Blackwood, please proceed." Mr. Blackwood adjusted his glasses and opened the leather folder. He pulled out a stack of documents, dense with legal text and stamped with red ink. "Mr. Vale," Blackwood began, his voice smooth and dry like sand. "As of 9 o'clock this morning, the ownership structure regarding your primary debts has changed." "Changed?" my father sputtered. "What are you talking about? I owe the bank. Chase Manhattan holds the note on the Hamptons estate and the commercial loans for the Florida project." "Correction," Blackwood said. "You did owe the bank. However, as you are aware, your loans have been in default for over 90 days. Your credit rating has been downgraded to junk status. The bank classified your debt as a toxic asset. They were looking to offload it to a collection agency for pennies on the dollar to clear their books before the fiscal quarter ended." My father paled. "They cannot do that without notifying me." "They can, and they did," Blackwood said. "They sold the entire debt portfolio, the mortgage on the Hamptons house, the lien on the Manhattan penthouse, and the commercial loans for Vale Holdings, yesterday afternoon." "Sold it to who?" my father demanded. Standing up, "Who bought my debt? I will talk to them. I will renegotiate." "You are talking to them," I said. My father froze. He looked at me, confusion warring with horror on his face. "Sit down, Julian," I said. He slowly sank back into his chair. "You?" "Allow me to introduce you to the sole proprietor of Nebula Ventures, LLC, Blackwood said, gesturing to me. "The entity that purchased your debt package at 4 o'clock yesterday afternoon." I leaned forward, clasping my hands on the table. "You see, Father," I said, "while you were busy laughing at my cartoons for the last 5 years, I was not just drawing, I was learning. I took the money from my first freelance contracts, the ones you called pocket change, and I invested it. I bought cryptocurrency when you called it a scam. I bought tech stocks when you said they were a bubble, and I saved." I slid a single piece of paper across the table toward him. It was a deed. "I did not just make $3 million last night," I continued. "I have been solvent for years, and when I heard through Gideon that your empire was crumbling, I had my lawyers watch the debt markets. I knew the bank would dump your loans. I was waiting for it. You own my house? My mother whispered, her voice barely audible. I own the house, I confirmed. I own the cars. I own the furniture. I own the company. I am your creditor. Mother. And you are currently in default to the tune of $2,400,000. My father stared at the paper. His hands were shaking so hard the table vibrated slightly. You set us up, he rasped. You planned this. You let us think we were drowning just so you could buy the water. I did not set you up, I said coldly. You dug the hole. You jumped in. I just bought the shovel. So what now? Isabella asked, her voice shrill. Are you going to evict us? Are you going to kick us out on the street? That depends entirely on you, I said. I signaled to Blackwood. He slid 3 separate contracts across the table, one for each of them. I have prepared 2 options for you, I said. Option 1. I exercise my right as the primary creditor to foreclose immediately. You will be evicted from the Hamptons estate and the Manhattan penthouse within 48 hours. You will declare personal bankruptcy. You will lose everything, and you will leave with nothing but the clothes on your backs. You will be homeless, and you will have to figure out how to survive in the real world with 0 skills and 0 money. My mother let out a strangled sob. My father looked like he was about to vomit. Or, I said, raising a finger, option 2. They leaned forward, desperate hope kindling in their eyes. They thought I was going to offer mercy. They thought I was going to say, just kidding. Here's the money. Go back to your parties. You sign these contracts, I said, tapping the papers. If you sign, I will not foreclose. I will allow you to continue living on the Hamptons estate. Oh, thank God, my mother breathed, clutching her chest. Oh, Alessandra, I knew you had a heart. I knew you wouldn't do this to us. Let me finish, I cut her off sharply. You will live on the estate, I said, but not in the main house. The main house will be turned into a gallery and workspace for digital artists. You will live in the guest cottage. The guest cottage? My father choked. The gardener's shed? It has 1 bedroom. It is 500 square feet. It has a roof and running water, I said, which is more than you deserve. Furthermore, I will provide you with a monthly stipend for food and essentials. $2,000 a month for the 3 of you. 2,000? My mother shrieked. That won't even cover my facial appointments. How are we supposed to live on that? By working, I said. I flipped the contract to the last page. There is a condition attached to the stipend, I said. To receive the housing and the money, Julian and Elena Vale must maintain full-time employment, real employment, not consulting, not sitting on a board. I pointed to a clause in the text. I have arranged positions for you, I said. There is a vacancy for a night security guard at the local museum. That is for you. Father, since you like protecting things so much, you can protect art. And for you, Mother, there is a position at the local bakery, washing dishes and working the counter. You are insane, my father roared. He slammed his fist on the table. I am Julian Vale. I do not work as a guard. I do not punch a clock. This is humiliation. You are trying to humiliate us. I am trying to teach you, I said calmly. You told me money was the only thing that mattered. You told me I needed to understand the value of $1. Well, now you are going to learn. You are going to learn how hard it is to earn $15 an hour. You are going to learn what it feels like to serve people who look down on you. I won't do it, my father spat. I will never sign that. Then take option 1, I said, leaning back in my chair. Walk out that door. The eviction notice will be on the gate before you get back to the Hamptons. You have $0 in your account. Julian, who will take you in? The Sterlings? The banks? They all saw you last night. You are toxic. You are a joke. The word hung in the air. Joke. My father's face turned a violent shade of purple. The veins in his neck bulged. He looked at me with pure, unadulterated hatred. He was not looking at his daughter. He was looking at the architect of his destruction. With a roar of incoherent rage, he lunged across the table. He moved faster than I expected for a man of his age. He scrambled over the mahogany, knocking over the pitcher of water, his hands reaching for my throat. "You little witch!" he screamed. "I will kill you! I will kill you!" I did not flinch. I did not move. From the shadows behind me, a large hand shot out. My personal bodyguard, a man named Marcus, who made the museum guards look like children, intercepted my father in midair. He grabbed Julian by the collar of his expensive suit and slammed him back down onto the table. Crunch. My father groaned. The wind knocked out of him. Marcus pinned him there, one hand easily holding him down, his face impassive. "I would not recommend that, sir," Marcus said calmly. My mother screamed and covered her mouth. Isabella jumped up, backing away into the corner. "Get off me," my father wheezed. Struggling uselessly. "Let him up, Marcus," I said. Marcus stepped back. My father rolled off the table, coughing, straightening his jacket with trembling hands. He looked small. He looked defeated. He looked at me, and for the first time in my life, I saw fear in his eyes. "Sign the papers," I said, "or get out." My father looked at the contract. He looked at the door. He looked at my mother, who was weeping silently, her spirit broken. He realized, with a crushing finality, that he had no cards left to play. With a shaking hand, he picked up the pen. He signed. My mother signed next, her tears staining the paper. "Good," I said, taking the contracts back and handing them to Blackwood. "Welcome to the working class. Your shift starts on Monday. Do not be late. I hear the supervisor at the museum is very strict about punctuality." I stood up. The meeting was over. "Wait," a voice said. I turned. It was Isabella. She was still standing in the corner, looking from her parents to me. She had not signed anything. "What about me?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I cannot live in the shed with them. There is no room, and I have my music. I have my future." She looked at me with that same entitled hope she had shown in the hallway. "You said they have to work," Isabella said, "but I am different, right? I am the artist. You understand. Ali, you know how hard it is. You will help me, right? You will send me to Europe? You will buy me the violin?" I looked at my sister. I looked at the girl who had watched me be tormented for years and said nothing. The girl who had laughed when our father called me a failure because it meant the heat was off her. She was 21 years old, but she was still a child, waiting for someone to hand her the world. "Isabella," I said softly, "you are right. I do understand." Her face brightened. "Really?" "I understand that you have been lied to," I said. "You are not a prodigy. Isabella, you are mediocre, and that is okay. Most people are mediocre, but the reason you are miserable is that you are trying to live a life you did not earn and do not want." "But the money," she stammered. "The violin." "There is no violin," I said, "and there is no allowance for you." "What?" She looked stricken. "But how will I live?" "The same way I did," I said. "You are young, you are able-bodied. Get a job." "A job?" She repeated the word as if it were a disease. "Doing what?" "Wait tables," I suggested, shrugging. "Walk dogs, work in a library, or if you really want to play music, go busk in the subway. If you are as good as you think you are, people will pay you. If not, well, you will find out quickly." "You can't do this," she wailed, tears streaming down her face. "I am your sister. You are supposed to take care of me." "I am taking care of you," I said. "I am cutting the cord. I am stopping the delusion." I walked to the door. I paused with my hand on the handle. "You have 2 weeks to move out of the main house," I said without looking back. "I suggest you start packing. And Isabella, if you decide to get a job at a coffee shop, let me know. I tip very well." "Welcome to the real world," I said. I opened the door and walked out. leaving the three of them in the glass tower, holding the shattered pieces of their fantasy, while I stepped into the elevator. Going up, the ink on the contracts dried 3 months ago. It was a quiet affair in the end. There were no more screams, no more thrown vases, and no more threats of disownment. When you are stripped of your illusions, you tend to become very quiet. My father, Julian, signed his name with a hand that looked 20 years older than it had the week before. My mother, Elena, did not even look at the paper. She just stared at the wall, perhaps mourning the loss of her social calendar. They moved out 48 hours later. I did not watch them leave. I did not stand on the balcony and wave. I simply sent a moving truck and a set of keys to the guest cottage at the back of the estate. It was a small, one-bedroom structure that had previously been used to store gardening equipment and pool chemicals. It was clean, it was dry, and it was warm. It was more than they had given me when they let me live in the emotional winter of their neglect. Life, as they say, went on, but it went on very differently for the Vale family. Last Tuesday, I decided to drive into the city. I told myself I had a meeting with a gallery owner, but deep down, I knew I was going there to see the exhibit, not the art, but the exhibit of justice. I parked my car, a modest, reliable hybrid, not a flashy sports car, across the street from the oddly shaped, brutalist building on West 57th Street. It was the Manhattan Institute for Avant-Garde Design. It was a place known for displaying the kind of art my father loathed: abstract sculptures made of trash, video installations of people sleeping, and digital projection mapping. And there he was. Julian Vale stood by the revolving glass doors. He was wearing a gray uniform that was a polyester blend, clearly stiff and uncomfortable in the summer heat. A badge on his chest read, "Security." He was not the head of security. He was not a manager. He was the man who stood by the door and told tourists where the bathroom was. I rolled down my window and watched. A group of art students walked in, carrying portfolios and wearing clothes that looked like they had been splattered with paint. In the past, my father would have sneered at them. He would have made a comment about them being unwashed hippies or drains on the economy. Now, he held the door open for them. "Good morning," he muttered, his eyes fixed on the pavement. "Thanks, Pops," one of the students said. Not even looking at him, I saw my father's jaw tighten. I saw the flash of the old anger in his eyes. But then, I saw him swallow it. He had to. He needed the paycheck. For the first time in his life, Julian Vale was not the most important person in the room. He was part of the furniture. He was protecting the very thing he had spent a lifetime mocking. The irony was so perfect it felt scripted. But it was just the cold, hard poetry of reality. I did not get out of the car. I did not go over and taunt him. I did not need to. Seeing him standing there, forced to be humble, forced to be useful, was enough. He was finally learning the lesson he had tried to teach me, that you have to work for your place in the world. I put the car in gear and drove away. My next stop was a small, bustling cafe in Queens. It was noisy, smelling of burnt coffee beans and disinfectant. I sat in a booth in the back, pulling my hat down low. Isabella was working the lunch rush. She looked different. The heavy stage makeup was gone, replaced by a sheen of sweat. Her hair, usually lacquered into a perfect bun, was pulled back in a messy ponytail. She was wearing a black apron over a white t-shirt that had a coffee stain on the shoulder. She was not playing a Stradivarius. She was balancing 3 plates of eggs Benedict on one arm while navigating a crowded floor. I watched her for 20 minutes. I saw a customer yell at her because his toast was cold. "I am so sorry, sir," Isabella said. Her voice was shaking, but she did not cry. "I will get you a fresh order right away." "You better," the man snapped. "And don't expect a tip." The old Isabella would have collapsed. She would have called our father. She would have screamed that she was a star and that this man was a peasant, but Isabella just nodded, bit her lip, and walked back to the kitchen. She looked tired. She looked worn out, but for the first time, she looked real. She was no longer a porcelain doll kept in a glass box. She was a human being dealing with the friction of existence. I left a $100 bill on the table for my coffee, a coffee I did not drink, and walked out before she could see me. I heard later from Gideon that she is taking night classes at a community college. She is not studying music, she is studying graphic design. It is a small step, and she has a mountain to climb, but at least she is climbing it with her own feet. Maybe, in 10 years, she will be a decent person. I hope so. For her sake, not mine. The final stop of my journey was the place where it all began, the Hamptons. I drove through the iron gates of the estate. The sold sign had been taken down months ago. The landscaping was still impeccable, the hedges trimmed into geometric perfection, the fountain bubbling in the driveway. It was a beautiful house. It was a masterpiece of architecture, and it was completely, utterly empty. I walked through the front door. The sound of my footsteps echoed on the marble floor of the grand foyer, the same foyer where my father had laughed at my painting, the same foyer where I had been told I was a joke. I walked into the dining room. The table was gone. The chandelier was still there, missing its teardrop crystal, just like in my painting. I stood there for a long time, listening to the silence. People asked me why I bought it. Why would I want to own the site of my trauma? Why would I want to live in a house filled with ghosts? But I had no intention of living here. I walked to the large bay window looking out over the ocean. I pulled out my phone and dialed Gideon. "Is the paperwork ready?" I asked. "It is on your desk," Gideon answered. "Are you sure about this? Allie, you could sell that place for $15 million. You could flip it." "I do not need the money," I said. "I need to change the story." "The Ether Foundation," Gideon said, testing the name. "It has a nice ring to it." "The Ether Residency for Young Artists," I corrected. I looked around the massive, gilded room. I imagined it different. I imagined the dining room table replaced by drafting tables and Wacom tablets. I imagined the stuffy drawing room filled with easels and messy paint buckets. I imagined the sound of violins practicing in the bedrooms, not played by forced prodigies, but by kids who actually loved the music but couldn't afford an instrument. "I want this house to be a sanctuary," I told Gideon, "for the black sheep, for the kids whose parents told them art isn't a real job, for the ones who were told they were a waste of space. I want to give them a room, a meal, and the tools to create. I want to turn this monument of vanity into a factory of dreams." "Your parents are going to hate it," Gideon laughed. "Living in the cottage, watching a bunch of starving artists take over their mansion." "Let them hate it," I said. "Or better yet, let them watch. Maybe they will learn something." I hung up the phone. I walked out of the house, leaving the front door unlocked. The contractors were coming tomorrow to begin the conversion. The gold leaf would be covered up. The velvet curtains would be taken down to let the light in. The house of Vale was dead. The house of Ether was being born. I walked down the stone path to the beach. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of violet and burning orange, colors that I had used 1,000 times in my work, but which were infinitely more beautiful in reality. I sat down on the sand, taking off my shoes. The water rushed up to touch my toes, cold and cleansing. I opened my sketchbook. It was an old habit, one I had never broken, no matter how many millions I made, no matter how much technology I had. I always came back to paper and pencil. I started to draw. I drew the horizon. I drew the waves. I drew a small figure standing on the shore, looking out at the vastness of the world. For the first time in my life, I was not drawing to escape. I was not drawing to prove I was worthy. I was not drawing to earn a paycheck or to spite my father. I was drawing because I wanted to. The wind blew my hair back from my face. I took a deep breath of the salt air. It tasted sweet. I thought about the $3,200,000 sitting in my bank account. It was a lot of money. It was security. It was power. But as I sat there, watching the sun dip below the water, I realized that the money was not the prize. The prize was this moment. The prize was the silence in my head where the voices of doubt used to be. The prize was the knowledge that I had walked through the fire and come out not just unburnt, but forged into steel. I looked at the drawing in my lap. The figure on the page looked strong. She looked at peace. I closed the book. They told me I was a joke. They laughed until their sides hurt. But they forgot the most important rule of comedy and of life. The person who laughs last is the one who writes the ending. And my ending? It is not a tragedy. It is not a farce. It is a masterpiece. My ending is worth $3 million and a freedom that is absolutely priceless. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It was a long journey from that dark room in Brooklyn to this beach, and I am grateful I could share it with you. If you are listening to this and you feel like you are the black sheep, or if someone has ever told you that your dreams are a waste of time, please listen to me. Do not let them hold the pen. Transform their doubt into your fuel. Do not take revenge with violence or anger. Take revenge by becoming so undeniably successful that they have to watch you shine from the shadows. I would love to hear from you. Where are you listening to this story from? Are you in your studio? On your commute? Hiding in your room like I used to? Let me know in the comments below. And share your own stories of proving people wrong. Please make sure to subscribe to the BitterSweet Drama Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button so this story can reach more people who might need to hear it. Together, we can turn the tragic into the triumphant. Stay creative and stay free.